So moderating this conversation, we have my friend Stacey Vanek Smith, a senior story editor for Bloomberg Audio and a special correspondent for Marketplace. And joining her will be Sam Kass, an American political advisor, chef, personality of all kinds, investor, founder. What else? We wear a lot of hats, man. Nice to see you. Give them a round of applause, please. Thanks. Nice to see you. I'm gonna hug you too. Wherever you want. Yeah, that's great.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
How you guys doing? Good.
End of a big week.
I gotta say, two of my heroes are here in the front row. Mary Nessel and Alice Waters, who've shaped everything we think and do in this space. So if we could just acknowledge them. Two true heroes. So like, the pressure's on. You know, it's like the student is now got to like perform in front of the teachers. All right, I'll get it together. I'm gonna focus now.
All right, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, it's big shoes to fill. Well, the first thing I wanted to ask you is, you've been in this space for a long time, in a lot of different roles, in policy, author, chef, talking head, all of it. And I'm wondering how you've seen the conversation change in the time that you've been a part of it.
That's a good question. I mean, I think the conversation has changed in an extraordinary way. I think if you sum it up more simply, it's gone from the visionaries and advocates who were just sort of saw the problem and started pounding their fists to say, hey, everybody wake up, and starting to battle with the health community, battling with a few companies kind of on the side, but trying to like make this thing a thing. So now, it's pervasive conversation on all kinds of, in every level of society. I mean, I still think we have a ton of work to do to truly mainstream these issues, and we can talk more about that. But, it is now something that's being considered on climate and environment in a way that even in the last 5 years, that's been transformational. 10 years ago at COP21, I was there trying to do a dinner on climate. Like, literally, it was not discussed at all, the intersection of food and climate, at the most important climate conference in the history of humanity. And that's definitely changing. And it's too slow. It's still a stepchild of these conversations, but it's definitely there, and I think we've made a lot of progress, but definitely have a lot more to do.
Well, this is Climate Week. This is the end of Climate Week. So why is it important to talk about food when we're talking about climate?
I'm sure people have been talking about this a lot, so I don't want to repeat what you've already heard. I mean, I think it's so fundamental to the conversation on climate change, it's hard to even know where to start. Number 2 driver of emissions globally, but unlike
behind like fossil fuels.
Yeah, but behind energy, but unlike energy, where we can see a future where that curve can bend and start coming down, food and agriculture is going straight up with absolutely no bend in sight. Number 1 use of the world's fresh water. Number 1 driver of deforestation. Like every time we see a tree cut down the Amazon, it is for animal agricultural production to either plant soybeans or graze cattle. And the list can go on and on. So I think we have to fundamentally lessen the impact of the food and agricultural system on the planet. So that's one. I think the second piece, and this part continues to be entirely overlooked, food is on the front lines of climate. I do this dinner called The Last Supper of all these ingredients that our kids or grandkids probably aren't going to have because of climate change. It's like coffee, wine, chocolate, shellfish, crustaceans. We lost 95% of the Georgia peach crop last year. Chocolate's doubled this year in price, and we haven't even started yet. I could go on and on and on. I won't take up our time on that, because we're basically moving from a time of abundant resource, so super cheap energy, plenty of soil, plenty of water, growing food in the most stable climate that scientists can observe in the historical record, to a future that we're entering right now, of serious resource constraint. So we're out of water. Soils are wildly depleted across the world. And extreme volatility. And so you have a system that was just constructed with abundant resource and stability. And now it's just not set up to produce food with this extreme volatility. And that is a really serious and quite scary, when you start looking at the numbers and the modeling, it's pretty intense about what we're going to face. And it's nice to talk about peaches and the crabs are gone, and I can tell you about all this stuff but it's like when you look at what's going to happen to rice, wheat, and 60% of calories just come from 4 crops. And so I know we talk a lot about, the visions for our perfect food system and all the things that need to happen. But we're also like on a knife's edge at all the time. We only got about 6 months of food to keep the world population alive at any given time. And, this is serious stuff. And so when you look at our ability to produce consistent amount of calories and food that's even half nourishing in a price point that most people can afford on a global basis, like we have extraordinary challenges ahead. And I think the third area where it's really important, this is the part on all the work I do trying to build new companies in this space, is unlike energy, where the best we can do is just make it be less bad, or mobility where it can be less bad and where our cars aren't killing everybody. Food and agriculture, for me, is the only system on planet Earth that has the capacity to sequester enough carbon. It's the place to start. I know we need to get into water and biodiversity and the rest, but carbon's going to be where we need to start. In the time horizon, and this is very important, that the science says we have. It's like all the stuff you hear about, direct air capture and all the money it's getting, it's like, it's all bullshit. Like it's really important for the future. Like I think it's good that people are working on it. But the cost, like on per ton basis about what that can actually do, it's a joke. It's not even close. There's no way it's going to scale in the time horizon that's going to matter. Like they may finally be doing it, but we're not going to be around for that. And the tools and technologies and practices that farmers have at their disposal now have the ability to sequester huge amounts of carbon right now, start really truly bending the curve, and bring a lot of income on farm that's desperately needed. You have 1 billion people around the globe farming or working in the system. It can really scale. And there's some things that I'm working on seeing that are really exciting. There's some problems, challenges, plenty of greenwashing, plenty of bunk credits out there and all this stuff. There's challenges. But there's an opportunity for Food and Ag to solve the most essential threat that humanity's ever faced in a way that I don't think any part of the economy can. So that part gets me really hopeful at the possibility, not necessarily hopeful about where we are, but definitely hopeful at the possibility.
If the conversation has changed a lot in a really important way, why haven't we seen more progress? Why aren't we seeing the same progress with it that you're talking about with like fossil fuels and carbon and things like that?
On the climate side?
Yeah.
We can also talk about the health side on that.
We can talk about the health side too.
Look, on the carbon side, the numbers just aren't working right now. So I think the brass tacks comes down to this transition towards a fundamentally more regenerative agricultural system is going to cost a lot of money. And it's going to come with a lot of risk. Like change, particularly in agriculture, is risky.
For farmers,
for farmers,
company.
Yeah, for growers. And so right now what you have is, and this is especially true in a high inflation environment, which we've been in, consumers aren't going to pay a penny more. I'm talking mainstream, like mass market here. Like here in New York and in Brooklyn, you'll have like, but wait a minute, that great brand. I'm like, yes, I love them, I eat them, but I'm talking about like most people here. They're not willing to pay a penny more for something that's like sustainable. They just aren't right now. People will say it, when you look at the data, that's not happening. And that's been less so over the last couple of years, frankly. So there's no consumer pull. The food companies, who are pretty low margin structures to begin with, are like, I'm not gonna give up any margin to invest heavy dollars in this if it's not gonna help me on shelf sell more product. the processors are sort of like, well, my customers, the food companies, aren't asking me for this, really. Like, so there's some pilot money, there's some good stuff that started to happen, but they're not really seeing an ROI on it. So all those companies are starting to question even the money that they had already put in over the last few years, because they're not seeing it actually get an impact ROI, really, or a business case ROI. The processors are like, well, they're not asking me. I'm not going to spend any money on this. Why would I try to restructure my whole supply chain for something that nobody's asking me to do? And so you're then asked, we're back to like what we've been doing, which is saying, growers, like, be regenerative. What's wrong with you? Don't you care? And the growers are like, okay, so let me get this straight. You want me to change all my operations, which will likely actually lead to a drop in yield for the next 3-4 years, take on all the risk associated with that, which includes losing my farm, because it's not like we got a lot of cushion here, and for some yield benefit 3, 4, 5 years in the future, and for a benefit that right now the market's not really telling me that you want, we're asking to do a highly irrational thing. And so we have to figure out who's going to pay for this. And I, frankly, sadly, I don't think it's going to come from the food industry. I think it's going to have to be other parts of the economy who have created this problem, paying this part of the system to solve the problem. In the beginning, I think over time, policy can then come in and start putting much more hard policies on either carbon tax or cap and trade or some other mechanisms to start standing this, marketplace up here. But in the beginning, I just think I don't see another way, and I think farmers are acting rationally in that regard in terms of the economic decisions they have to make, and that's why it's not going anywhere. I mean, also we have to do the hard work in shifting the cultural values of eaters to say, I care about how this product is produced, really, not just us. Like I will say, I've been saying that I hate Climate Week. I've said it at every time I've spoken. I'm not going to let my last speaking thing of the week go without this, because every year I come here, and every year, normally I curse when I say that, so I kept it clean for you guys today. Every year I come here, we all talk to this. I go to the same place, I have the same conversation with the same people, and I'm losing my mind because we have to get to the hard questions about why it's not standing up, and we have to do the hard work of shifting that people start to buy food on this, both for health, which is definitely shifted on health, some, and for climate. And if we come back another year, just have the same conversation, I don't know what I'm gonna do.
I've been warned. So how do we change that? What is the way to move it forward? I mean, is it you're talking about maybe changing consumer demand? That seems hard. I mean, why isn't policy the solution? You said it probably wasn't, but that seems like a very obvious one if you've got something that needs to kind of come up against company profits and things like that.
So I guess my perspective on policy it depends. Policy is always so often talked about in such broad strokes that I find it to be completely unhelpful. Policy has a really important role to play. But we overstate the role of policy in the solution here to our peril. And I went into the White House, I had Omnivore's Dilemma, I had food politics on my other arm, and I went running in. Food politics, very informative. Omnivore's Dilemma, very problematic. We have this narrative that it's the reason we're eating what we are is because the government subsidizes some things, doesn't subsidize something else. If only we switch those subsidies and their collusion with the big guys, everything would be fine. I'm just telling you that it could not be further from the truth. The reason we are eating what we're eating is not because of the subsidy system. The subsidy system is bad policy and could be used to incentivize much better behavior through the system, without a doubt. And I'm not here to say in any way, as the person who's in there getting my ass kicked, trying to fight on policy that doesn't have a really important role to play in very specific ways. But that's not what's truly determining what's on our plates. It's just not. And there's hard to imagine any kind of a couple rules that are going to change all that could ever have a shot at being law in the United States, let alone in other places. So on the climate side, for example, super important policy roles to play. Government has a big role to play around insurance and ensuring transition to regenerative systems. Like there's a lot of risk. And right now there's no insurance product for farmers to take on that risk and something goes wrong. Huge, really important policy that could move a big needle, right? Measurement and verification on on the outcomes of what's happening on farm. Super expensive, not good enough, really important. And the government actually, I think the Biden administration put like $200 or $300 million into trying to crack how do we measure soil health, soil carbon, these things. Really, really important. Rules of the road for measurement. Part of the problem in the system is like there's been a bunch of bullshit. And so there's like lack of confidence in like, just some bad credits or bad, insetting where you're saying this is actually better, grown in a better way. And so the confidence from the market where people, advocates rightly point out that was garbage, and everybody's like, all right, well, I'm not going to do anything. So real standardization about how we measure is important. And the rules of the road of a functioning marketplace here, or how you inset it and how you account for it, really important work for the government. And they purchase a lot of food, so they could help start standing up a lot of the systems just by how they're spending dollars in the food that the government purchases. So huge role to play here, right? But in the end, farming and eating is a private sector endeavor for the most part. It's a relationship between growers and processors and manufacturers and retailers. And there's only so much that really can be done to shape that. It's not to absolve of the responsibility. I just think it's such a neat and convenient story, the ones we've been telling ourselves. And it actually leads us to the wrong set of answers. Like the hard work is to shift what our culture cares about. Like the reason our politics have left us short is because nobody votes on this issue. Nobody. The only response from the White House that's ever happened is just because Michelle Obama decided she cared about it. Not because voters were telling us that we should do it. It's like we were in the kitchen in Chicago talking about it. Like that would be great if we did it. She felt in her own life she knew it was a really important issue for the nation's children, and so she decided to take it on. But it was not because we did some polling. We're like, this is going to resonate with our voters. And it's the reason why, and the same is true for climate. The reason why Kamala is not talking about climate change, in fact, sidestepping issues on climate, is because right now it's dropped in importance for voters. It's at number 11. So what do you want her to do? She can be on her soapbox all she wants and then lose Pennsylvania, and then that's it. And then we're really in trouble. So we got to do the work to get our culture to care about this, both from a consumer standpoint and from a politics standpoint. That would be the food movement. That's the movement. When we say the word movement, that's what it is. And that's the hard work that will then underpin the change we need in these two big systems that shape how we eat. So I think we made a lot of progress, but it's not scaling. It's not becoming just the way that businesses are run. And I think it's because we're trying to shortcut that kind of hard, slow, tedious, hard to measure, not that fun work of setting up what do we care about? Why do we care about it? Why does this make sense? Why do we have to do it? And it's a push-pull. So government will do some good stuff. They'll be pushed back. Businesses can do some good stuff. They'll step back. It's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And I think that's the only way forward.
So you don't see there as being a large-scale solution. It sounds like more small initiatives from, Michelle Obama's initiative was not small. Do you think something like that can move the needle a lot, or is that?
Sure. Everything inherently, even big things are incremental when you're talking about an $11 trillion global food system that's feeding, many billions of people every day. So even big piece of technology that could be transformational is still going to touch one part of a very complicated system that has all kinds of players, and which, by the way, part of the complication, and there's always these analogies. Well, we did it for EV batteries, or government did this. Yeah, but nobody really cares about the EV battery. Everybody cares about their food. And whether we like it or not, people love Big Macs. You guys may all think that's killing everybody, but man, do they love their Big Macs. And it's delicious. I haven't had one in a long time, but I used to eat them, and they're delicious. And so, everybody has a stake in these things. Everybody cares. Everybody has an informed opinion. We grow food in every state in the nation. Everybody's got a stake. So that means politically, things are, they're pretty intracted. They're hard to move. And by the way, depending on who's in office, that's not always a bad thing. 4 years ago, you want them telling you what to eat? Okay? They were ordering fast food in the White House. One of the saddest days of my life. That's for whatever weird reason. As bad as it all was, and there's way worse days, there's something so dark for me about that day. Where they're serving Pizza Hut. I mean, it was it represented everything to me in such an intimate way. Anyway, I digress. Let's not go back there. I think what Marion said is right. We have to vote. We have to win. The other thing is we just have to win. Stop complaining how bad it is. Just get out there and win. Start putting points on the board. Be pragmatic, be strategic, and let's start winning. I think we're getting cut off here. Danny just walked on the stage. She's shut up, that's enough. But I do, all right, one more second.
Yeah.
But I think it's really right. We have to win, we have to organize, you have to start making these elections count, making our voices heard, and throwing the people out of office who don't care about this stuff. Until we start doing that, we're only gonna get so much out of both the companies who are feeding us and the policymakers who are shaping the policy. And so that's the work. That's what it comes down to. And the solutions have to work in the economic realities that we're faced. We have to grapple with that. I think so often we just think, last thing, Danny, that we think too much oh, everybody's willing to pay a little more. People are not willing to pay a little more. The answers have to fit in the realities that we're dealing with. It's just the facts, as much as I wish they weren't true. And if we can get into those harsh realities and deal with the trade-offs that inherently then come, I think we can make a lot of progress. I think if we stay sort of resistant to that, we're just gonna be kind of around the edges of how we're really feeding ourselves. Sorry, Danny, I love you.
It's all good. Preach it, Sam Kass. That's all I can say. Thank you so much. Thank you,
Thank you.
Stacey.